This is the problem for Andy Burnham, right? Ed Miliband actually shares his sort of political economy. Ed Miliband is sort of ideological fellow traveller with him, and together he'll be thinking, as a team, we can kind of actually drive through the sort of change I want to see. The problem he has is that there's a kind of unholy alliance of both the bond markets and the trade unions, who are terrified of Ed Miliband.
We're going to be unpacking the politics of the day, from how the Labour Party's beauty parade turned ugly, to reform telling minorities they shouldn't fear a Farage government, to the extraordinary suggestion that Andy Burnham, I kid you not, is actually going to be our first female Labour Prime Minister. With me in the studio, our City AM's opinion and features editor, Alys Denby, the Labour voting Brexiteer. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And the former diplomatic editor of The Times, Michael Binyon.
Hello, Ed.
I'll explain in a moment why Alys is a Labour voting Brexiteer, but let's start with the Labour leadership. It feels a long time ago that Keir Starmer announced his resignation. It is true, it was only on Monday, but it feels like old news. In fact, today feels like a bit of a dull news day, but it's rapidly becoming clear that there are no serious contenders planning to run against Andy Burnham, meaning that he becomes our de facto next Prime Minister on my show on July the 17th. Isn't that's such a great timing? But of course, I mean, it's inevitable, Alys. I mean, it is a coronation. He is to be coronated. There's a lot of dispute whether that's a word.
There's no such word as coronation.
There is, actually. We've looked into this, but I agree with you. Crowned is better.
Crowned, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Look, and I find this quite frustrating. So obviously we're now in a sort of unofficial purdah. The government can't do anything. You're already seeing everybody jockeying for position in Andy Burnham's cabinet. And this just confirms to me that this whole thing is an indulgent exercise in making Labour MPs happy.
Yes. It's a large therapy exercise.
Exactly. It's not. It's party before country. We can ill afford another 3 weeks of stasis when we have a defence investment plan that needs funding. We have, a floundering economy. And I'm frustrated with the Labour Party for doing this. This is exactly what people voted against at the last election, because it's what the Tories kept doing, and Labour have proved that they're no better.
I know, it's interesting. The other thing is that, whatever you think of this government, there are some sort of good news stories emerging, particularly on things like immigration and sending asylum seekers back home and getting them out of hotels have all been kind of emerging today. The interesting thing for me, Michael, is that the man who is to be coronated has gone dark. I mean, we haven't heard a thing from him all week.
Not a thing. He's not given a policy announcement. He's not outlined a programme. He's not even suggested which direction he's going to take the country, apart from getting it going again, which, of course, inevitably means, just carry on and do what you can. We don't know. We don't know anything about his foreign policy. I mean, Keir Starmer's caretaker Prime Minister is going to be representing Britain still at the crucial NATO summit in Turkey in a few days' time. We don't know whether he's going to be able to present a credible British defence spending plan or not, because they're meant to agree one that nobody seems to agree with. We don't know anything of what's going to happen, and Andy Burnham is sitting there like a sort of wise man in his castle, just selecting his both his victims and his choice anointed. And we'll see whether the key thing is, who will he pick for Chancellor? That's the key appointment. And of course, already we're having a massive row about everyone saying, will Miliband get it? And if he does, will that be a disaster or not? So we're having this kind of phony battle going on.
What do you think?
I don't really think he's the right guy. On the other hand, he's a powerful man with powerful authority, and you need somebody who can take decisions and stick to them. I think he's pretty business unfriendly, and that's the danger. And if he sticks to an absolutely obsessive accent on net zero, I mean, he's not going to be allowed to do that if he becomes Chancellor, but it's not a good signal to global community. And on the other hand, you need somebody who can tell the Treasury, this is what I want you to do, and he probably could do that.
Yeah, look, this is the problem for Andy Burnham, right? Ed Miliband actually shares his sort of political economy. Ed Miliband is a sort of ideological fellow traveller with him, and together he'll be thinking, as a team, we can kind of actually drive through the sort of change I want to see. The problem he has is that there's a kind of unholy alliance of both the bond markets and the trade unions, who are terrified of Ed Miliband because he's, as you say, extremely business unfriendly. He will move the party much further to the left. He'll be bad for industry, be bad for jobs in the North Sea. And I I'm fairly confident he would drive the economy into the ground. But I think that's what Andy Burnham wants.
I mean, I think the interesting thing is that Ed Miliband, I always say this, he is at least a minister who knows what he thinks and gets it done. I mean, I think the crisis in energy prices is a serious one, so I don't say I support what Ed Miliband does, but the danger would be that he'd be more powerful than the Prime Minister.
Well, you get back to a Gordon Brown, not George Brown some time ago, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair situation, where effectively number 11 runs the entire domestic programme because they control the money. And Tony Blair had the vision, and he had all the kind of exuberance of what you need from Prime Minister, but it was the dour man in number 11 who actually controlled the budget.
But I expect Andy Burnham would be much more popular, at least at first, than Ed Miliband was. I mean, Ed Miliband's been comprehensively rejected by British voters in the past. And Andy Burnham's been rejected by the Labour Party in the past in favour of Ed Miliband. But yeah, I think he would... I mean, certainly at the moment he's at the peak of his powers.
I don't think it matters the fact that he's not given any policy pronouncements, because he clearly wants to get his ducks in a row. He wants to line up what he wants to do, and he's got to line up how he's going to do it and who's going to support him. And he's always going to have a problem with the Labour Party left, who are going to be against everything except doubling welfare payments. And we don't know how... wait till he comes into power and see what he does.
I mean, it is a sort of momentous week in British politics, and I sort of have this sort of odd feeling that, nothing is happening, and we're in this kind of stasis where there is actually no news because the government can't do anything and Andy Burnham's waiting to take over. So I tip my hat, obviously, to Al Carnes, who continues to run a pseudo-leadership campaign. But today's hero, of course, is Mike Tapp, the immigration minister, who's gone off on one, written for the Times, putting out his own policy. Shabana Mahmood, his boss, has let it be known that she's asked the Prime Minister to sack him. The Prime Minister said, well, I'm leaving, I don't really care. It's hilarious. And then Mike Tapp tweets back from San Francisco saying, I've dropped the mic, but, I'm in San Francisco, so, do one.
Yeah, turn off the tap is what Shabana Mahmood would like.
I like that. She thought about this morning.
Oh, very good.
Look, this is obviously very funny. He's obviously jockeying for position in Andy Burnham's cabinet. But actually, what the way in which he's doing that is by saying that we should relax the rules around immigration. Essentially, he wants us to be slightly more generous to care workers who are already here. And if that's the direction of travel for Andy Burnham, I do not think that is what the public want to see.
I disagree on care workers. That is an absolutely crucial need, and we have been very reliant, probably over-reliant, on people coming from overseas to the many care homes where, frankly, they're understaffed, underpaid, and in dire straits. And making it more possible for people to work legally who are already there and stay there with some kind of commitment, I think that's a good thing. But it is an exception. It's not across the board.
I think there is an issue with people who've come here on care worker visas but do not work in the care sector.
Well, that's different,
You need to make sure people are not abusing the system.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, Michael, George Brown instead of Gordon Brown.
Yes, I did.
A case of mistaken identity.
Well, yes, but...
and you remember, of course, George Brown's most famous case of mistaken identity.
Which was...
George Brown was at a reception in South America, and he spotted a fetching figure in a red dress.
Yes.
And propositioned this person and said, would you like a dance?
Yes.
And the figure responded, there are 3 reasons why we cannot have a dance. First of all, you're drunk. Secondly, the band is not playing a waltz. And thirdly, I'm the Cardinal Archbishop of Lima.
That's right, that's a wonderful one. Well, let me tell you one other one. When he was travelling in the Middle East, he met Yasser Arafat, I think in Damascus or somewhere, where Arafat was going on about how his people were suffering and the Palestinians, and there was starvation, at which point George Brown leant across the table and patted Arafat's large belly and said, not much starvation there.
Now, let's just pause with this extraordinary quote that's appeared in The Spectator in an article by Tim Shipman, formerly of this parish. The amazing statement that Andy Burnham is going to be Labour's first woman Prime Minister. This claim is made on the basis that he will focus on issues like health, education, family finances, as opposed to supposedly male issues like bombs and budgets. The source concludes by saying Burnham will be a female PM in all but sex. It's so loaded, Alice, this quote. It's all about, is Andy Burnham in touch with his inner female? What is a woman? I mean, I guess with any kind of outlandish quote, there's something in there about Andy Burnham's approach to politics, maybe?
I mean, look,
You're giving me a look.
As a Labour voter.
You're giving me a death stare. As a Labour Brexiteer, yes.
I'm delighted to see myself at last represented by a Labour woman in Downing Street. No, look, this is absolutely absurd. It's deeply offensive to claim that that defence is not an issue that women care about. That's literally keeping people safe. That women only care about fluffy things like education and health. It is really, I find it deeply offensive. I find it bizarre. And I think it's a sort of pathology in the Labour Party that they've never had a female Prime Minister, I think, or a female leader, sorry. I think it's a bit like how we used to have with the England football teams and penalties. It's a sort of psychological barrier that they just can't get through. But once they do, as the Tory parties have managed to, they'll realise that women leaders can be brilliant and they can be rubbish and they can be mediocre. They're not the answer to every problem just because they're a woman, and they don't necessarily have particular interests in policy areas just because of their sex.
Yeah, I mean, it does remind me a bit, this statement, a bit about the trans debate. That the thing that is so offensive about it is that, you can take over women's spaces, you can remove women from language. And I can't believe that the person giving this quote, Michael, didn't see that point. You can say that Andy Burnham will be perhaps a more touchy-feely Prime Minister, will be more focused on social issues, and that's a good thing. But to say he's to all intents the first female Labour Prime Minister is just absurd.
Well, I think Andrea Burnham has a chance when he comes to office of getting to the issues that matter. And that's not just defence, but that obviously matters. But things like social cohesion and, general vandalism and antisocial behaviour and all those sort of things about just the kind of society that we live in and getting the country to work together. I mean, is that a female concern? Of course it isn't, but I think Andrea Burnham will probably take credit for it and try to maintain that he's above sort of gender division. He's there for everyone. Well, of course, everyone should be. There's no division of sex according to policy. That's ridiculous.
I also find it particularly bizarre when his whole brand is sort of beer and lads and footy.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. It is exactly that. Oh, I wish I was watching the football.
Exactly.
Yeah. Silly. I mean, just silly. And if you tried saying that to Margaret Thatcher, boy, you would have got a bombshell in your ear. You would have got some really, really harsh statement, withering talk, which would make you look a very small little boy, whoever you were.
We were talking earlier about Andy Burnham kind of not putting his head above the parapet this week, and he's gone dark. But actually, when you think about it, there are a few kind of issues emerging in terms of what Burnhamism might look like. One is Andy Haldane, the former head of the Royal Society. I can't remember what it is. He's chief economist somewhere anyway. He's a big cheese. Chief economist of the Bank of England. Thanks for that. Always good to have somebody from City AM on the podcast to correct us. Saying that taxes should be simplified, something I've been banging on about for a long time. Not that nobody has noticed because I'm not important, but I think that's a good point. Jim O'Neill saying don't start bandying about things like exit taxes, be sensible about business. This idea of a Downing Street in the north is another idea that's emerged. So there are some... and the two treasuries, splitting the treasury in two. So there's a lot going on there, Alice.
Well, I find it interesting that we are seeing these quotes and briefings come out from his economic advisors, because I think that suggests that he knows that the economy is a massive weakness for him, and he knows that the markets are anxious about a Burnham premiership, and he's really trying to roll the pitch and reassure them with that. This idea of moving Downing Street to the north is just ridiculous. It's a waste of time. It's a just completely superficial exercise in pleasing his base. Civil servants need to be near each other in Whitehall and Downing Street. If there's an emergency, you need to be near your colleagues so you can respond. Disruptive, pointless. I mean, we've seen the whole circus with the European Parliament of moving itself to Strasbourg. It's absurd.
Yes, that's a bit of a slam dunk, actually. I was going to try and fight back, but I don't think I can.
Weren't you, as a lord, likely to go and sit somewhere at one point? There was a suggestion you should all go off to York, or was it Manchester?
Yeah.
Where were you going to go and sit? Not in the Lords, somewhere else.
It was Michael Gove being irritated when he was a cabinet minister. He started banding it about that we'd all move to York.
York, yes, that's
he's
right.
He's an idiot, and he's ostracised in the House of Lords as a result.
Oh, dear.
Nobody speaks
well,
to
he
this.
can go to York and everyone else is staying in
Nobody
London.
speaks to him.
Yeah.
But the whips have given him an office in York. But what do you think about this idea of two treasuries, Mike?
Well, that's quite interesting. I mean, we were talking about George Brown. That was his idea. Well, it was the idea when he was Minister for Economic Affairs, I think it was, Secretary or Minister for Economic Affairs. There was a Department of Economic Affairs. And it was quite a good idea. It's sort of like the German model, where you have a Ministry of Finance, which looks after sort of taxes and revenue and all that. And you have a Ministry of Economics, which is in charge of, all the other issues, business, growing the country, overall economy, all that. And it would sort of take over some of the work of Department of Business, or whatever they keep calling it. They keep changing names. But splitting it is also a means of stopping an absolute dictatorship by the mandarins in the Treasury, who can more or less tell any minister what they have to do, because they know what the figures are, and ministers rarely do.
But I think the Treasury would counter that they are actually constrained too much by the OBR and by by independent forecasts. So we sort of do have a split in that sense.
I suppose we do, yes. I mean, it's an idea. I think actually rearranging the various departments is a bit of a fool's game. I mean, it's
deck chairs on the Titanic.
Well, it's all that. Yes, it just takes an awful lot of energy. People move from one building to another. They have a new title and they repaint all the doors with different names, and sort of thing. What's the point? Just get on and make the government work.
I agree. It's a form of displacement activity which avoids you actually addressing the issues that need to be addressed. And to be fair, we have talked about all this sort of stuff endlessly. There is a constant debate about what do we do about the power of the Treasury. There is a constant debate about moving government departments into different parts of the country. And to be fair, Rishi Sunak did move a significant part of the Treasury to Darlington, quite near his constituency. And there is something to be said for putting, obviously, government offices in different parts of the country. The DVLA is over in Swansea and so on. So that is sensible, but I can't see how a Downing Street of the North would work. We used to have, we've got regional government offices and so on, but it is a bit of a displacement activity. I think my mother has a quote from some Roman legionary, complaining about a reorganisation of the Roman army and saying, it's a complete and utter waste of time, and we'll all be back to where we started again. And that was a quote from sort of 2,000 years ago. So
they're stuck up in York and they want to get back to London.
Gove has moved us to York and it's all a waste of time. Anyway, let's talk about some of the other parties, because the Reform UK's Danny Kruger has been speaking at a big conference this week, and he gave a speech where he said that minority groups have nothing to fear if Reform gets into government. What he does call for is a turning back to Britain's Judeo-Christian historical values. He says that Reform is unashamedly opposed to the principles of mass migration, Islamism and self-identified gender, but that it is ideas and not people that Reform is fighting against. Now, I thought this was quite an interesting speech, Alice, because I read it and I found that I actually agreed with quite a lot of it, and I thought it was put in quite a reasonable way, and it moved Reform away from this horrible kind of Farage, there's a sort of anti-white movement, and frankly some of the racist undertones that inform some political discourse. It was sort of talking about, in some ways you could easily Danny talks about Judeo-Christian historical values. I would talk about the principles of a liberal democracy. So I thought it was an interesting speech, actually.
I don't know. I think if I was a minority, being told not to be afraid of Reform would make me extremely afraid. I think it's the least comforting thing that you can hear. Look, yes, I agree with you, the principles of a liberal democracy. But I do sort of think that Danny Kruger's brand of Christian nationalism is a dead end. I mean, we can talk about being a Christian country, but only 5% of people go to church.
Yes, and I think he's talking about Judeo-Christian values, which you can't really say...
Well, no, but he is an evangelical Christian.
Yes, he is. That's correct. That is the context.
And I also find that the sight of him, and he's an articulate, intelligent man. James Orr, another who was his close kind of confidant, who's also doing the policy agenda.
He's a Cambridge academic.
Yeah, these are smart guys, right? But they're sitting there alongside Lee Anderson. I don't understand
how that's an offer. I think James Orr scares me more than Lee Anderson in many ways.
I haven't met him, but I hear he's very smart.
Yeah.
I mean, to talk about values, there's nothing wrong with that. And looking at what underpins our civilization. And, of course, Christianity, for, 1,000 years or more, has been absolutely at the heart of all our laws and all our, and also, of course, all our quarrels. But it's very important in this ethical value system that more or less the whole country used to subscribe to. And, in a way, the present idea of liberal democracy is a sort of, to some extent, secular version of what we used to have. Now, it's perfectly reasonable to talk about that and to talk about other ideas that have popped up, but you can dismiss them without saying anyone who thinks these things, anyone who doesn't subscribe to Judeo-Christian values, is out of the, beyond the pale. We should get rid of them, and that tends to then sound like a kind of anti-Muslim campaign or something of that kind.
I mean, it's interesting we talk about kind of Labour ministers freelancing on immigration policy. I mean, we have regular bust-ups in reform, Zia Yusuf versus Robert Jenrick on what their technical policy is in terms of deporting people. I'm wondering whether Danny Kruger's, as I say, what I thought was a thoughtful speech will cause a row in reform.
Yeah, I think that rows in reform are what's ultimately going to do for it. I mean, there's also this massive question hanging over Nigel Farage's £5 million donation and whether or not he stood aside for Boris Johnson for money, essentially, whether it was essentially rigged an election. That's the accusation, which he denies. I just think that they're a kind of collection of impossible personalities. Look, they've got a long time. They've got 3 years to sort of get it together to look like a national party. But at the moment, they look more like a cabal.
Yes, exactly. I agree. Big, several personalities fighting to a certain extent in a sack. It doesn't seem like a sort of coherent group, and each one, popping up and giving their own views, however interesting they might be. Talking about interesting views, Alice, I've been referring to you throughout as a Labour Brexiteer. You were a Tory. You are a Tory, I think.
Am a Tory.
And you voted Labour in order to keep reform out, I think it was, or was it the Greens? I can't remember.
Greens.
And now, apparently, you've converted to Brexit. You've put a picture of yourself wearing an In T-shirt.
Indeed.
Which I have one of those T-shirts as well, but unfortunately it's in my country house, so I couldn't get it for...
We should have worn them today.
In time, exactly. But you're now a convert to Brexit, and I just, enough is enough, Alice.
I don't think we should talk to her anymore. I think you've excluded from this conversation.
You've crossed a line.
Look, to be fair, I said I love Brexit in the same way that Winston Smith said I love Big Brother. It's something that I've reluctantly come round to. Look, I think back 10 years ago, and I think the reasons why I remain are I convinced myself that, that the EU was all about cooperation and tolerance and the post-war peace settlement, and that there were enormous economic benefits. But actually, ultimately, at the end of the day, it was a tribal thing. It was because I thought that people like you, Ed, like David Cameron and George Osborne were good chaps.
People like us, Alice.
Who were my sort of people.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that people like Marc Francois, for example, were beneath contempt. But when the result came out that it was 52% of the country went that way, you cannot hold that many of your fellow citizens to be beneath you. It's just not the right way to go. And I think that where I've changed my mind, it's not about whether or not leaving was the right thing to do. There's no counterfactual. We can't know if we'd been better off in, and I do not think it would have resolved the question anyway. What I can say that I'm confident of is that rejoining now, which I think is something that Labour Party might be interested in running a campaign on, would be a terrible mistake. If we were divided back then, back in 2016, we are even worse now. The people poured so much of kind of identity politics into this one issue of our trading relationship with Europe. I think it'd be even more divisive now, and worse than that, I think it'd be terrible for businesses. Businesses need a stable, predictable environment in which to take long-term decisions. Many have adapted to our trading relationship with the EU, and it would just be yet more upheaval. It would be bad for growth. It would make people poorer and angrier than they already are, and I think it would be a mistake.
Oh, I take exception to almost all of that. First of all, there's no question of rejoining just like that. The Europeans wouldn't have us just right now.
Well, we're on worse terms.
We'd have us on very bad terms. But what we should do and could do and probably will do is get closer to Europe in many, many ways, particularly harmonisation of laws, say, on agriculture agricultural products or on veterinary standards or on mutual recognition of standards on who can practice what jobs where and all that sort of thing. That should happen and will happen and must. Otherwise, we're simply a little offshore island isolated. Secondly, I think actually the country already is having buyer's remorse. A lot of people feel, particularly when they have to go and put their fingerprints on some pad every single time they go abroad.
Every time I fly to Nice.
People are fed up with that. I mean, they might dump it and suspend it because it's simply not working. But the whole idea that we are together with, Venezuela and Panama and all those countries from far away that come to Europe, well, not many people do, but whoever comes has to fingerprint and face recognition and all that. It's not working. Why should we Brits who have to do it? So I think there's a great anger about the results of Brexit, and I don't think it will stir up another huge row. I think part of the row was to do with immigration when the original Brexit thing came in. That's a separate argument, and that's actually going on irrespective of Brexit.
Look, when you talk about sort of buyer's remorse, that's not the sense you get in the business community. We had the head of the CBI just this week saying that she thought rejoining would be a mistake. What the business community want is actually more opportunities to trade both with the EU and with the rest of the world as well.
Well, trading with you, if it's possible, but if you have these barriers, invisible barriers or even real ones all the time, unless you can bring those down or get around them, exports to Europe they have certainly been hurt by this.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ed?
I think this. Tilting at windmills is the phrase that comes to mind. It drives me mad that the Brexiteers are still fighting the last war. So if you think about it, who are the people who get on their high horse and say it's all terrible? It's the Brexiteers saying, there's a secret plot to rejoin the EU. We have to be vigilant. And, I saw David Frost, the great Brexiteer. Theresa May put a picture up of her meeting Michel Barnier, who was in town this week to talk at a conference, and she hosted him for a cup of tea and said it was good to catch up. And it was David Frost saying, well, that says it all, doesn't it? That's all you need to know, what the secret agenda is. And it's complete and utter nonsense. You are right, Michael. There is not a cat in hell's chance of Britain rejoining the EU anytime soon, probably not in our lifetimes. But what there is an opportunity, now that we've had Brexit and it's done, to have a grown-up relationship. Terrible phrase, the grown-up. So it's a lazy phrase, but you know what I mean. To have a relationship with the European Union, which is practical. What deals can we do with the European Union that makes life easier for British business and for British tourists or consumers who want to go abroad, who may want to buy a place in Europe? And that seems to me eminently sensible. I will never forget, I always remember during the Brexit referendum going to have lunch with the Swiss ambassador randomly, and the first thing he said was, welcome to Switzerland. He basically said, if you vote for Brexit, you're going to be like Switzerland. You're just going to have, you will find yourself constantly dealing with the EU. They are your neighbour. They have a massive impact on your economy, and you're going to be in constant negotiation with them for deals. And that's where we are.
And that's where Switzerland is.
All I would say to the Brexiteers is please let British governments do deals. By all means, comment on the quality of those deals, but do not say that this is somehow trying to undermine Brexit or rejoin Europe by the back door, because it's not. They happen to be our biggest marketplace. They happen to be on our doorstep. We have to deal with them. You cannot, with one straight face, say that Brexit had no impact on our economy, but we're now free to do massive free trade deals around the world.
And we haven't done them. Not many. We've signed a few.
We've done a few, but they don't move the dial.
CPTPP is a good one.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I feel like now after that? It's a cigarette. So apparently smoking is cool. The pop stars Madonna and Charlie XCX were seen smoking on the front row of a fashion show in Paris recently. Shane Watson has written in today's Times about how, while they may have wanted to look shocking and cool, they looked more like naughty schoolgirls. Smoking is transgressive these days. If you go to a West London dinner party and somebody brings out a packet of cigarettes, it's about the most subversive act. And everybody immediately starts chain smoking.
But that's why it's cool. Smoking is cool. I used to smoke and I was much cooler and sexier back then. Obviously, I'm very glad I gave up for my health. But yeah, look, these vape things are very uncool, let's be clear. Horrible, fruity smoke. They look like awful bright, like bubblegum
yes,
colours.
Yes, it was the cigarettes they were smoking. If you're going to be cool, smoke a brand redacted, but don't smoke some fruity clover.
It was a clove.
Cigarette.
Well, that's quite French, though, isn't it?
And
I've got an alternative for you. See, I've never smoked cigarettes. I just absolutely hate them. But I have discovered the joys of smoking a pipe.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
Sit there, only after, in the evening, get a coffee, sit there, see what's on the news, and put some tobacco in a pipe.
You've seriously got a pipe?
I have,
like
yes.
Tony
Is this a new thing?
It is fairly new. The last
is it one of
7 or 8
those
years.
pipes?
It's not a sort of
the
Sherlock
curved
Holmes one. It's all
yeah.
curved. No, I got to sort of stick straight out. But it's very difficult to find the tobacco.
Did you go out and buy a pipe?
Yes.
What happened?
Yes, I did. I thought
you were sitting there bored one day and you thought, you know what? I'm going to take up pipe smoking.
Pipe smoking, yes. I just like the smell of the... actually, smoking is not very pleasurable. I mean, it's horrible, but the smell in the room is wonderful. That marvellous smell.
You smoke inside?
Sitting inside, smoking the pipe. And then that atmosphere as though you're walking into a headmaster's study or something, or a don's office.
It is true that a lot of smoking is about ritual.
Yeah. Yes.
So if you have a pipe, you've
got to clean it and fill it.
Filling the pipe.
Oh, yes.
Relighting the pipe.
That's the whole fun. Smoking, it's a bit of a bore, but all this ritual is sort of, fiddling around with it. But if you go to a shop and ask for pipe tobacco, people say, "What's a pipe?" They've never heard of it. I mean,
you have to go to some specialist tobacconist.
Yeah, you do. Very few people actually stock pipe tobacco now.
Look, we should be clear in public service broadcasters that smoking is very bad for you. There's nothing cool about dying of lung cancer.
Well, you're right. You're right. Yes, I agree. That's true.
Even if it looks great.
But it also isn't cool. I don't think it is cool. What's so cool about
Charlie XCX is cool, Michael.
Well, is it?
Gee.
I adore Times radio listeners, but you do get some odd things. I mean, this is the point I was making about the EU. Somebody's just said, you're a platform for Remainer betrayal. Sorry to keep coming back to it.
Am I the Remainer betrayer?
We all are. But I mean, that's the kind of point I was making. Sorry, I got distracted by that. But it's exactly the sort of point I was making. We're not a platform for Remainer betrayal. We're just making the point that we've got to deal with Europe in some way.
Yeah.
But there are trade-offs with that as well, right? It depends what Europe demands, and it depends how much that constrains our ability to trade with others.
Sorry, I've pulled us back to the EU, which is a subject, obviously, that after a certain amount of time bores people senseless. I think we'll give the last word to Andy, who says 3 white, southern, entitled right-wingers.
Quite right.
Oh, right-winger, that is
Great
an insult.
Diversity.
Yes.
Poor old Alice, who keeps parading around the fact that she's Labour. She's Labour, she's Brexit, and you'll be reading Alice's column next week on why it was right to renationalise Thames Water. Alys Denby and Michael Binyon, thank you, as always, for being such a brilliant guest. This is Ed Vaizey on Times Radio.